Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we're going to talk about a concept that honestly is secretly running our economy. It influences every single purchase you make, and it's called elasticity.
So, let's start with a puzzle you've probably thought about while filling up your tank. When gas prices shoot through the roof, do you actually drive less? Or, do you just kind of grit your teeth and pay? How much do these price changes really affect what we do?
Okay, check this out. Here's some real data from 2014 in Canada. Gas prices took a nosedive. They dropped over 20% in just a few months. I mean, that is a huge price drop. But look at the consumption. It only went up by about 7%. So yeah, people reacted, but not by that much, right? It wasn't a one-to-one thing. So this brings up the big question. How do we actually measure that responsiveness in a consistent way? And that right there is the heart of the gasoline puzzle. We've got to have a way to measure this kind of response that works for everything, whether we're talking about gas in Canada, coffee in Japan, or, anything, anywhere.
Now, your first instinct might be to just say, hey, let's use the slope of the demand curve. But that's kind of a trap. The problem is the slope's value totally changes depending on the units you're using. Dollars or yen, gallons or liters, it's not universal. We need a tool that just cuts through all that noise. And that tool, it's called the price elasticity of demand. And it's brilliant, really, because it solves the whole units problem by focusing on percentage changes. It just doesn't matter what currency or what unit you're using. A 10% change is a 10% change, period. And that gives us one clean, standardized number we can use to compare basically anything.
And what's so powerful about this one little number is that it lets us map out every single product on a spectrum of responsiveness, from one extreme all the way to the other.
So on one end of this spectrum, you've got elastic goods. This is where that elasticity number is greater than 1. And what that means is that even a small change in price leads to a big change in how much people buy. Then on the other end, you've got inelastic goods. Here, the elasticity is less than 1, and it means that even huge price swings, they don't really change consumer habits all that much.
The easiest way to think about this is pizza versus gasoline, right? If your favorite pizza place has a 50% off sale, they are going to be swamped with orders. The place will be packed. That is elastic demand. But if the gas station has the same 50% off sale, you're not going to just start driving around in circles to burn more fuel. You might top off your tank, sure, but that's about it. That's inelastic. It's really the classic difference between a want and a need.
So what's the secret sauce here? What actually makes something elastic or inelastic? It's not just random. It turns out there are a few key things at play that determine how sensitive we are to a price change.
It really boils down to 5 main factors. First, and this is probably the biggest one, is the availability of substitutes. The more choices you have, the more elastic it's going to be. Second is time. The more time you have, the more you can adjust your behavior. Then, of course, you've got luxuries versus necessities, how you define the market itself, and how big a piece of your budget it takes up.
Let's actually zoom in on that one, the definition of the market, because it's a perfect example of how this whole elasticity thing can completely flip depending on how narrowly you're looking at a product. Just look at this. If the price of one specific brand of cereal, say Post-Raisin brand, goes up, what do? You have a ton of other options. You can just buy Kellogg's or the store brand, whatever. The demand is super elastic, around minus 2.5. But now, what if the price of all breakfast cereal goes up? Well, what are your substitutes then? Toast? Oatmeal? There are way fewer options, so demand suddenly becomes inelastic at minus 0.9. It all depends on how you define that market.
Okay, so now we get to the payoff, because understanding elasticity, it's not just some academic exercise. It is at the absolute heart of every single pricing decision that any business ever makes.
This is the big question, right? Put yourself in the CEO's chair. You want to increase your total revenue. What's the move? Do you cut your price to get more customers in the door, or do you raise it to make more from each customer you already have? Well, the answer depends entirely on if your product's demand is elastic or inelastic.
So here's the rule of thumb. It's actually pretty simple. If your demand is elastic, meaning your customers are really sensitive to price, a price cut is going to bring in a flood of new sales, and your total revenue will go up. But if your demand is inelastic, a price cut is a total disaster. You won't get enough new customers to make up for the lower price, and your revenue will actually fall.
And I promise you, this is not just some textbook theory.
Back in 2014, Amazon and the book publisher Hachette got into this massive, very public fight over this exact concept. The whole thing was a high-stakes war over the price of ebooks.
See, Amazon's whole argument was that ebooks were highly elastic. They said, hey, if we drop the price from $15 to $10, sales will go up so much that everyone, Amazon, the publisher, the author, will all make more money. But Hachette fired back. They argued that their specific, best-selling authors had very few substitutes. Their readers weren't that sensitive to price. Demand was inelastic, and a price cut would simply lose them money. It was a literal billion-dollar debate about elasticity that's still shaping digital pricing today.
And you know, elasticity is more than just a one-trick pony for setting prices. The same basic framework, this idea of measuring how one thing responds to another, it actually has other superpowers. It can explain the relationships between totally different products.
So there's this thing called cross-price elasticity. It tells us if two things are substitutes or complements. For instance, if the price of an iPad goes up and, as a result, sales of Samsung tablets go up, the cross-price elasticity is positive. They're substitutes. But if the iPad price goes up and sales of apps from the App Store go down, the elasticity is negative. They're complements. They go together.
And finally, there's income elasticity. This just shows how our buying habits change when our income changes. It helps us see the difference between necessities like bread, we buy a little more as we get richer, luxuries like caviar, we buy a lot more of. And then there are what economists call inferior goods, and it's not because they're bad products, it's just that we tend to buy less of them as our income rises, because we upgrade to better alternatives.
So here's a final thought to take with you. Elasticity isn't just for economists or CEOs. It's a lens for your own life. Take a look at your own spending habits. For what products are you elastic, and for what are you inelastic? Understanding this isn't just about knowing some economic term. It's about understanding the hidden forces that shape your world and your decisions. And now you have the tool to see them.